Morning. Top of the hill again. I should start calling these the Hilltop Diaries or some shit like that. But I'm not going to. I'm going to just think about numbers actually. Because I made a video yesterday from just around the corner on the other side of this rock on about oneness and being connected, and how the idea of unity and singularity and all those kind of terms have gained kind of mythical status, you know. They form the bedrock of a lot of our understanding, you know. We have almost a romantic, certainly mythological attachment to the number one and the unity that it represents. And I'm maybe suggested by an aspiration toward a unity of consciousness, or I don't know, something like that anyway. But either way, I was thinking about one, because one is a number, isn't it? I know that's blindingly obvious, but sometimes we don't think of it as a number. We think of it as this, and numbers is what you get when you divide the unity up. And maybe that is true in mathematics. I don't know enough about maths, but maybe that's true. But either way, I'm thinking about other numbers, because numbers are funny like that, aren't they? And I think, well, several things. Firstly, I think there's, for me at least, I bundle numbers into two groups, and I'll tell you what they are in a minute. And then each of the numbers within those two groups has a kind of sense for me, a kind of felt sense. I'll tell you what I mean by that as well. The first thing is the two groups, and this is kind of bedded in science as well, or at least brain science, but it's from experience as well, and you've probably got it as well, I'd hope. Is that, you know, lower numbers form part of my primary perception. Numbers up to 4, 1, 2, 3, and I'm just about 4, but 4 is right on the edge. They form primary perception, and numbers higher than 4, I have to engage in a different kind of perception. So, for example, if I've got a bunch of matchsticks and I throw 3 on the ground, or someone just throws 3 on the ground, I don't have to count them. I can just see 3 matchsticks, or 2 matchsticks, I just see 2, or 4, I see 4, or obviously 1, I see 1. No counting involved. But higher than 4, I can feel something else happening. I can feel myself counting them, you know. And sometimes I might count them in bunches. There's a bunch of 2, there's a bunch of 3, 3 and 2 is 5. Or there's a bunch of 2, there's a bunch of 2, there's another bunch of 2, 2 2s are 6. So I can do them in bunches. But there's definitely a counting process, which is kind of secondary to the primary perception. Numbers up to 4 I can see as instantaneously as I can see different colours. I can see green on the grass, I can see black on the dog, I can see grey on the rock, I can see 2, 3, 4 matchsticks, or 1 matchstick, primarily. And there is good research for that. I think some fMRI studies were done indicating different parts of the brain are active when we look at and enumerate low numbers of objects as opposed to higher numbers of objects above 4. Different parts of the brain are involved. And also in terms of timing, the time it takes to recognise that there are 1, 2, 3 and 4 matchsticks, let's say, is all the same. You know, we don't. Whereas numbers higher than that, it takes longer the greater the number. So it takes a certain number of milliseconds to count 5 matchsticks, slightly more to count 6, slightly more than that to count 7, slightly more to count 8, and so on, which is what you'd expect, not because counting takes time. But below 4 and below, it doesn't make any difference, because you're not counting them, you're seeing them instantaneously. Yeah? Now there are some reports, I don't know if this is true or not, about some savants who can instantaneously recognise much higher numbers. So they can throw like a whole bunch of matchsticks on the ground and they'll just say 51, 112. I don't know if that's true or not, but I have heard that. I think Oliver Sacks writes about that. But anyway, he was a great neurosurgeon. But so that's this thing about numbers. It's these two groups. Ones that seem to fall prey to primary perception. I can recognise in the same way I can recognise numbers. I beg your pardon, recognise colours. And then there's this higher group of numbers which I have to count. And they're just kind of lots. You know, they generally fall into the category of lots that I have to count. I think I'm right in saying, I just remembered this actually. I think I'm right in saying that amongst human universals, you know, the things that all people have in common, all humans have in common, there are numbers. All societies have names for numbers up to 3 or maybe 4. But after that, a lot of societies, you know, more traditional societies, primitive societies, I might say, they also have numbers up to 3 or 4, but then after that they'll just have a word which means lots. So that seems to accord with that observation that, you know, numbers are either subject to primary perception, in which case we give them names, and after that they're subject to counting, so we might not give them names, or we might just call them lots, something like that. So that's the first thing. The second is about the feeling of numbers, and again, I don't know if you get this, but certainly those low numbers, the ones that are subject to primary perception, I get different feelings from those. It's not exactly synesthesia, although I know some people do get kinesthetic synesthesia, feelings from numbers. I don't get it quite strongly, but I can definitely detect a difference. Like the 1, for example. When I contemplate the idea of 1 as a number, I get this sense of wholeness, you know what I mean? I can feel a kind of fullness and a completeness about it, you know, and 1, even the sound of the word 1, you know, has this kind of rounded sound to it, isn't it? And I can kind of feel that in my body, you know what I mean? 1. So it accords with that thing I was talking about in terms of connectedness and wholeness and unity, you know. I can kind of feel the aspiration toward that, the oneness of consciousness, the oneness of the world, the aspirational oneness of consciousness and world mingled in a non-dualistic way, you know what I mean? Like the number itself holds that for me. But other numbers are different. 2, for example, I feel as balance, I feel as division, so I can almost feel a line down the middle of my awareness when I think of the number 2, almost like the T sound is that line, which just breaks something in 2. But then the 2 forms out of the balance, you know what I mean? 2 feels like symmetry to me. 2. Like the 2, oh no, it doesn't matter. 2. So that's a complete feeling, you know what I mean? So it's associated with things like standing in a square-on way, balance, with your weight distributed between each foot, or hold something in each hand that's the same weight. I have those kind of senses in my body with the number 2. 3 is different. 3 has got motion to it for me. There's lots of symbols that involve 3, aren't there? 3, lots of kind of Trinity symbols, and the symbol for Hecate is like got this triune shape, and there's lots of those kind of shapes which have that 3ness. And for me, it's always about motion, because the 1 goes to the 2, and the 2 goes to 3, and the 3 goes back to the 1. So it has this motion in almost like a rotational sense to it. So when I think of 3, and the number 3 written down, is that the right way for you? Yeah. It kind of echoes that point, as if it's turning, you know. There's a turning sense in 3. And a turning and a returning, you know, return. 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 3, 3 goes back to 1, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Self, Brahman, world, you know, the world is all that kind of stuff, that 3ness thing. And then once you get to 4, and I'm right at the limits of feeling this, 4 is corners, 4 is a square. So once I get to 4, it's very separate from me actually, 4. It's over there somewhere, and the 4ness is laid out as corners. So it's almost like I've moved off from it and delineated a piece of land, you know what I mean? 4. There's probably other ways of doing it, you know, there's probably tetrahedrons you can construct as well, but that's just how it appears to me, or it breaks up into this kind of shape, the cross, you know, a cross of 4, which is, it's not as nearly as strong in my sense as the 4 points at the corners of a square, but I've got a little bit of a sense of a cross as well, which I guess would be a square divided into 4, wouldn't it? So that's those numbers. After that, as I say, it just breaks into multiplicity. The lotsness kicks in, and I have to enact different processes to get involved with that. You know, combinations of balances and squares and rotations, put them all together, you know what I mean? Anyhow, you know, that's what I'm thinking about on the top of the hill today. I mean, the 1 is interesting, you know, because as I say, if anybody knows whether 1 really is a number or not, I'd be interested to know. I guess it is. We certainly treat it as if it is. I know it's a little bit different, isn't it, other numbers? But yeah, but 1 has a feeling, and the feeling is very akin to that aspirational sense of oneness, for me at least. 1 is up there. Like that. Now, enough nonsense.